Hi, are you an author in the middle of self-publishing your next book? Somewhere along the process, you've probably heard about creating an audiobook. You've been encouraged to make an audiobook. You know friends who've made the investment in creating an audiobook, but you can't bring yourself to get started because getting into the technical weeds just seems too daunting. But what if we could take that all away? What if we could remove 90% of the technical barriers, so all you would have to do is show up to the microphone and record? Or maybe you don't want to record your own audiobook. That's totally fine too. We have an experienced team of professional narrators that would love to audition for your audiobook. Our Done For You service guarantees that you will have a professionally produced audiobook ready for commercial release. If you're ready to get started today, please click the link below and schedule a free call. We can't wait to hear from you and to get started on your project.
Hello, and welcome into another episode of Starting with Curiosity and Encouragement podcast. I am author Stephen Uriest, and with me, as always, is my best friend and publisher, Susan Gabriel. Hi, Susan. How you doing today?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Happy
You're,
Memorial Day weekend to
yeah,
everybody
I
out there.
noticed your background has really showing a lot of collections back there. That's
I
yeah, that's really
I went to
cool.
my storage unit and took out all of my geek and nerd stuff. So I really love it, and it makes me actually feel really good. So I'm really enthusiastic sitting here and
Uh-huh.
looking around at all my stuff. I'm like that 12-year-old boy who couldn't afford anything, sitting here like I got all my cool stuff around me.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you have a
So
lightsaber?
thank you. Oh, I've got two of them, the green one and the blue one right behind me.
Okay, yeah, I
Absolutely.
see. Yep.
Above me is the Millennium Falcon. So I even have a dinosaur that growls every now and then just to keep me on my toes.
Tyrannosaurus Rex?
Yeah, you want to see her?
Yeah. Oh, that's really a good one. Wow.
And she can also
Wow. Shades of Jurassic Park.
it is the Jurassic Park. It is the Jurassic Park T-Rex.
Yeah, it looks like it.
She-
Very
She's
cool.
staring right at me. Oh, how fun on a 3-day weekend here.
Yeah.
Um, to all of our fallen service members who gave their life or served in our country and are no longer with us. We remember your service at this time on Memorial Day, and thank you for everything that you gave us for our freedom here in America.
Yep. Thank you to everyone who's serving now and who has served in the past. I'm
Absolutely.
very grateful. Very grateful.
I'm grateful myself. Today we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Erin Baer. She's the best-selling author of You Are More Than Your Sport, Balancing Life, Mental Health, and Identity as an Athlete. So without further ado, let's bring her right to the stage. Erin.
Hello, Stephen
Hi,
and
Erin.
Susan. Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, and to be
You're
clear,
most certainly
that's
very
not one.
welcome.
That is not one book because it looks like all one book, but that actually, to be clear to our audience, is 4 books. The names that is 4
Uh,
books.
Oh, no, that's
No,
one
no,
book.
that is
Oh,
one.
you are more than your
Is one
sport,
book.
balancing life,
Yeah,
mental health, and all of that, and identity as an athlete.
yeah. So
Oh
the title,
my! Wow,
Correct.
that's a very explicit title. Tells you really what's in it. So I'm anxious to hear more about that one. But I do know you've written other books as well.
Yes,
So I'd
that's
like to get into some of the others also.
definitely. Let's go right into it. Tell us about your book.
yes, awesome. So You Are More Than Your Sport is my most recent. It was published on March 22nd, and I actually have to rewind a couple of years. So back in 2022, I went under 5 different surgeries for different things, nothing related to being an athlete or a sport. But after that, I wanted to get kind of back on the horse or back on the course, whichever analogy you want to use. And I reached out to my alma mater, Rockhurst University, where I went to college for 4 years for my undergrad and had a golf scholarship. I reached out to them, said, hey, I just launched this book, The Badass Within, which was a book collaboration I wrote and gathered 14 other women to share their story about becoming a badass. And I said, I'd love to come and talk to, the campus, the women about being a badass and, just not letting anything really kind of define you. And they said, we'd love to have you come. However, we don't want you to tell that story. And I was like, okay, well, what story do you want me to tell you? And so they said, we want you to share your story for Mental Health Awareness Week to our student athletes about your time on campus, about navigating life as a student athlete and what you overcame. And I was, because I was so used to speaking on stage about domestic violence and sexual assault and being a badass. So I had to shift. I had to pivot. I said yes, and then I figured it all out later. And so I went to Rockhurst University, and it wasn't mandated by the coaches. It wasn't mandated by the school. And over 250 student athletes showed up to hear my story about being an athlete and how to navigate college life with, the stresses of school and the stresses of your demands as an athlete. Because as you grow up, we're taught you have to be a superhero. You have to have it all together. You have to be strong. And, if you get knocked down, you better get back up, dust off the bruises and keep on bleeding, but keep on going. And so over 250 student athletes showed up to that talk, and I got them laughing. I got them crying. And I went to dinner that night after my talk with a friend, and my friend said, I think you have your next book. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because I was so focused on being a badass, and overcoming different things that life throws at you. I never really thought about writing a book when it came to my athletic story. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, you have another book in you. And I was like, what? And she goes, yeah, about the blue chair. So if you look on the cover, you'll notice a blue chair on my book cover. And so there's a huge significance to the blue chair. So I was originally going to call the book The Blue Chair, but when I told some people, they're like, what's the blue chair? So it didn't make any sense. So I decided to take that talk I did at my alma mater, Rockhurst University, and I transcribed it. And then I realized it had to have more in-depth information, more feelings, because you only have so much you can talk about in an hour on stage, and you're talking to 18 to 20-year-olds. Like their attention span is not that high. About school or parties or sports or whatever. So I elaborated on the story, and then I added reflections in the back, and so it became You Are More Than Your Sport. It went through like 5 different title changes, I think. And when I was writing this book and putting it together, I told my husband, I said, I'm going to get a professional athlete to endorse this book. And he was like, well, good luck. And I'm like, oh, don't underestimate me. And instead of just getting one professional athlete, I got 4 former professional athletes to endorse my book.
Great.
And what I found out through the process was so many people can relate to You Are More. So it's not just, granted, this is a sports story about my golf injury. So the book is about me going to college, putting my whole identity into golf, putting everything I knew of what I was and capable of was being a great golfer, because I was bullied and teased as a kid, being a twin. My sister was the star. She was the track star. She was beautiful, talented, smart, popular, and I was ugly, bullied, and teased. And so golf became everything to me. And I put everything I was into golf. I was Erin the golfer, and that's all I could be and all I knew. So I went to college on a golf scholarship, and first season, I ended up having a sports injury during a practice round when I was trying out to make the cut to be in the tournament the following week. And my coach said I couldn't play until I got checked out by a therapist. When I went to the sports therapist, he said I was out for the season. I was devastated. Devastated. I didn't know who I was, what I was going to do. And I went to my coach and I said, I don't know what to do. I'm out for the season. I guess I'm not part of the team anymore. I wanted to be part of something, and now I wasn't. And my coach looked at me and he said, you're a part of the team, Erin. It's a matter of how you show up. And I didn't know what that meant. And then I realized it was showing up for practice. Even though I couldn't play, even though I couldn't practice, I could still be there for the other girls. I could cheer them on. I mean, that was hard enough not to be able to play, but then having to be positive and knowing that it sucked in the inside, I struggled and my mental health declined. I mean, it just went downhill. My grades started slipping and I went back to my coach and I said, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if I can do this. And so he told me to go seek counseling. And I was like, really? You want me to go talk to someone? I'm an athlete. I'm supposed to be strong. I'm supposed to have it all together. And you want me to go talk to someone and cry about this? I mean, that wasn't something I knew how to do. And so I sucked up my pride and I went and scheduled a session with a counselor. And that counselor, I met with her a few times, and then she told me we weren't a good fit. And I was like, you're supposed to help me. You're rejecting me. She goes, why is it not a fit for you? You know, like I was rejected my whole life. And then I was rejected by my sport from an injury.
Yeah.
You know, it was awful. And so she sent me to another therapist in the counseling center. And his name was Dr. Darden. And he was a basketball player in college. So he understood how to navigate life as a student athlete, both academically and athletically. And it led me to the blue chair. So that's what this book uncovers is my injury, my feelings from the injury, what I struggled with mentally, my identity, because I thought that I was just Erin the golfer, and now I had to just be Erin, and I didn't like that. I didn't want anything to do with that. And he taught me, you know, not to give too much away of the book, but that I was more than my sport.
Mm-hmm.
You bring up an amazing point with athletes and mental health. Too many times, a lot of our athletes, we view them as, you know, on a pedestal. And a lot of times they take that identity and they house it in, and they don't actually incorporate those feelings of emotions that we all get as people. I think there's a stigma that goes along with mental health and talking to a therapist, especially with athletes. In your opinion, how do we overcome that stigma of mental health, especially with athletes?
So I think the biggest thing, and all of us athletes know it, whether we recognize it or we admit to it, our coaches are there for our best interest. They're the ones who picked us, right? I was scouted in high school by my Coach Capra, who was my college golf coach. And he picked me for a reason. He saw something in me that he knew I had, regardless of if I played well in golf. He liked how I carried myself. He kind of knew of my past, you know, when we talked about the golf scholarship, and he had my best interest in heart. So to him, I was already a success. I could never do wrong. I could never disappoint. But as an athlete, we're taught that we are supposed to be proud and strong and nothing can knock us down. And if we get knocked down, we got to get back up. And we better not ask for help. We better not show weakness. And when I was struggling, I didn't know what else to do because I didn't want to disappoint coach. But in reality, at the end of the day, I didn't want to disappoint myself because I had been told I was a disappointment for so long in my life. And so overcoming the stigma of mental health, I had asked for help. I mean, mental health is something that's, you know, people have turned their nose up on. They've been like, oh, something's wrong with you. You have some kind of disease that's contagious or, you know, whatever. And the stigma around mental health is really hard around athletes because we're taught to have such a mentality of strength. Mm-hmm. And going to my coach is he gave me permission to say I'm not okay and I'm struggling. And if I don't get this under control or if I don't take care of it, then I'm never going to be back on that golf course being as strong as I need to be if I don't handle it now. So while I have the time that my injury had allowed, it allowed me to dig in some stuff that was, I guess, festering, you know, from my past, and allowing me to work through that and giving me the space to do that while putting the golf aside, by putting the athlete side aside. You know, as an athlete, we don't want to do that. We want to just keep going and showing people we're the best and we're amazing and we can do no wrong. And we want to get everybody's approval. But when you stop for a minute and if you're struggling and you go to that coach of yours, or your teammates and say, hey, me too, I'm struggling, I don't know what to do, that's when the stigma starts to get broken with mental health, because you're finally breaking the egg open of mental health and saying, hey, I'm struggling, I don't know how to do this, and I can't do it alone. And that's what we need to do. We need to overcome the stigma, because truly, would you not go to a doctor if you broke your arm? I mean, would you just wrap it with tape and say, oh, I'm good? I mean, we wouldn't. We would go to a doctor and say, my arm's broken, I can't use it, please fix it. Well, that's the same thing with mental health. It's nothing to fix, though. Mental health isn't something we fix. It's something we work through, and we learn to talk about things, talk and learn about who we are, what makes us tick, and relatable to other humans. We're not supposed to be untouchable. We're not supposed to be unbreakable, because at the end of the day, there's a struggle with everybody, whether you're an athlete, a mom, a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever. There's something that we all struggle with in our heads. I mean, we're human. We don't have the capacity to handle it on our own. And I think overcoming it is just really starting that conversation, going to someone you trust, whether it's a friend, whether it's a parent, whether it's a coach, whether it's a teacher. Luckily, I found out I surrounded myself with really good people that had my best interest at heart.
Mm-hmm. So after you had the injury, door closed for you for that year of playing golf, and then you went to the first counselor, and she closed the door on you, and you must have felt really devastated at that point. That must have been a really difficult climb from, from there to where you are now. That's an amazing recovery. And then did you go on to play golf the rest of your college career?
So yeah, she sent me to Dr. Darden. I actually stay in contact with him still to this day. And I continued my mental health journey for the next, 4 years, because it started in freshman year, but I did end up finally healing physically. But while I was healed physically, I still needed to heal mentally. And so I pursued mental health and counseling for the next 4 years. And I continued to talk to him on a yearly, quarterly basis. And we're really good friends now. So I did get to play golf again. And funny thing is last season in golf, I almost had the same injury 21 years later. I overdid something, almost had the same injury, freaked out, grabbed my wrist. It was the same wrist. And I ran over to a woman I call Mama Chris. She's on my golf league. Ran over to her and I freaked out. She's like, what's wrong? She immediately put ice on it. Everything was fine. Because I was playing a really good game, just like I was when I got hurt. And I was like, and talk about PTSD, man. 21 years later, it came back up, and I was like, I had to remember all the tools that I learned. And luckily, I'm fine. I didn't have an injury. I wasn't out for the rest of the season. Thankfully, it was like the second or last game of the season, so I did get to play. Wow. But I think our work is never done with mental health, and our work is never done taking care of ourselves. I mean, if I would have never played golf again, I at least discovered who Erin was without my sport, because I'm more than my sport. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I'm a motivator, whatever it may be. But we're always taught to, we're always asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? It's never, hey, how do you want to be as you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. How do you want to be as you? I appreciate that you're open about mental health with this. I think a lot of the stigma surrounds that people think there is something wrong with you. And people's pride and ego can't accept there's something wrong with me. So normalizing it, we all feel emotions. Every person that ever was and every person that ever will be, all feel emotions. We all feel different emotions during different times. We have different things that happen to us, or things that occur that we need to deal with, or things that we don't know how to deal with. And it's normal to have these emotions. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. having somebody who understands these emotions that you can actually speak with, so you can understand what you're going through, so you can understand more about yourself. That's where we need to overcome the stigmatism into it. Um, so anybody out there going through mental health issues, it is okay. You are not broken. Find somebody that you can relate with, somebody you can talk to, and just open up, allow yourself to be a little vulnerable and
Mhm.
deal through these emotions. So we know you play golf,
I
just out of
did.
curiosity. What other sports do you play?
So I had a brief stint with track when I was in 8th grade. I was the only one that could run the mile, so they made me run the mile. This was when I moved to California. So I was away from my twin sister, the track star. I was in California with my dad. I did track. I didn't like it. I don't like to run unless there's a bear chasing me, which is funny because my last name is Baer. So that's ironic. But it wasn't back then. And now so I just play golf, and then I am on a bowling league. So when the golf league ends, the golfers go play bowling, which is interesting because the two are very different. One you're going for a high score, one you're going for a low score. It doesn't make sense. It's it's kind of a mind confusion. But I was a bodybuilder for 8 years. 2009 to 2016, I was a competitor for bodybuilding, and I dominated Colorado. I went to the national level. I did not go pro. I did not keep pursuing the pro card because I was told that I wouldn't be a pro because I was a natural bodybuilder. And since I was natural, it would take me a lot longer to get the muscle I needed to be pro. And I refused to do steroids. So I went ahead and retired from bodybuilding because I wasn't going to jeopardize my integrity or my beliefs. And so I retired from bodybuilding and, played golf on a league for 18-hole women. And then I do bowling. So golf and bowling are my main sports now. I mean, I do weight lift still and do a little bit of cardio. But other than that, no other sports. Not yet anyway.
And does your sister still run track or
So
do marathons?
Interesting enough, she actually broke her leg in half when she was in, I think, either 8th or 9th grade when I was living in California. 9th grade when I was living in California. She was on a balcony of an apartment building, and the balcony dislodged itself from the apartment building. She fell and busted her femur in half, and that ended her track career. However, her daughter, Ava, my niece, ran track as a senior in high school, just graduated, and just went through state, and she actually beat her mother's mile record.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really amazing.
Yeah. I'm really proud of my niece. My sister had asthma or she has asthma. So she ran the mile back. I mean, that's, you're talking 25, 30 years ago, she could run the mile in 5.27. And that was, they've got a lot of different technology now.
Yeah.
5 years later, her daughter did the mile in 5:19. And she does not have asthma.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty incredible. So we have a bunch of athletes in the family. My dad ran track and my dad's a golfer. But a lot of our siblings and stuff didn't really pursue athleticism or sports. So it's very interesting that we did.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that, mostly they're individual sports, not necessarily team sports. And a lot of times people don't think about that. When they think sports, they're thinking baseball, football, things like that.
Yeah.
So, but, and I would think that in a sport, like an individual sport, like golf or bowling, whatever it is, that I could see how that can be even more devastating when you lose the ability to compete, because it's like that was your thing. You were an individual competitor, and that is gone from your life, and at least for a while. So I can definitely see how that would cause someone to feel, like they've lost themselves, lost their personalities, or maybe didn't know in the first place. So do you feel now like that's a blessing?
That I was
had the injury? Yeah.
I do feel that it was probably the best thing that could have happened to me at the time. No, my life was
Of
over.
course not.
I was a nobody. Growing up, I was just Erin, and I hated it because I was bullied, I was teased, I was tormented. And then, of course, I pick a sport that everybody hates, golf, right? You don't play golf.
Yeah.
And there's a stigma around women golfers back in
Yeah.
the day, which has obviously been proven wrong now. But I mean, let's just add fuel to the fire of being bullied. Let's play golf,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
getting that injury, yeah, I mean, it was the best thing that could have happened to me because it did lead me to the blue chair. It did lead me to like, who is Erin without golf? Like, and will she be okay with that? And at first I was absolutely not okay with being just Erin. I didn't want that again. I wanted golf. I was going to dominate the golf industry as a woman. I was going to prove everybody that I was somebody that needed to be paid attention to, put on a pedestal and admired, by hundreds of thousands of people. And having that injury allowed me to learn I have leadership skills, I have speaking skills, and I can be a part of something without necessarily telling people I'm a part of something.
And now you can speak to others and help them realize that they're more than their sport as well. So, it definitely, I can see as a blessing to other people in addition to yourself.
Yeah, when I wrote this book, it was originally for athletes, just athletes. That was my target. That was my niche. But come to find out, people have read the book, and I have a friend that does sales, and he hasn't read the book, but he watched my talk, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so much more than my sales numbers, or police people, so much more than the crimes that I solve." So it does really relate to so many. I just happen to use a sport analogy, and most people can relate to some kind of sport analogy, which is pretty cool.
Well, it's one thing with pride and ego for ourselves is that we do see ourselves differently, and a lot of times we will add monikers to ourselves that describe who we think we are. Author or athlete or speaker or whatever your job title may be. And people tend to forget that we are more than that. Just like you say, you are more than your sport. I've also come to notice with society that when it comes to sports athletes, we like them when they are providing their entertainment for us. However, once they stop being useful, we kind of push them to the side and forget about them. So how do we as society do better at taking care of our athletes?
I mean, that's a tough one. We're just people. We're people like everybody else. We just happen to be in a sports arena. Doesn't mean we don't have anything else we can provide. For me, I can be a good friend. I can be kind. I can be passionate. I can be empathetic. I'm just someone who happens to play golf and teach golf. It's not everything I am, and that's not all I have to offer to the world. So I think getting to know our athletes at a deeper level, asking different questions that are outside of the sports arena is important, because we as athletes, or at least for myself, and I'm pretty sure most athletes can relate to this, is that we feel like we're only good for you if we can provide you, obviously, like you said, the entertainment, or, if you're making a bet and you win on that game, right? We put so much value in entertainment, especially in America, entertainment, whether it be celebrities and movies, athletes, we put so much emphasis and value on that versus who are you as a person, and what do they do when the camera's not on? What do they do behind closed doors? Who are they? Are they struggling? Are they making an impact within their community? What are the different interests of them? Because at the end of the day, at some point, athletics or athletes' bodies are gonna stop working. They're gonna break down, and they're not gonna be able to perform like they used to. And then at the end of the day, who are they? So I think just
And with athletes, the body breaks down. I agree with that 100%. And with athletes, the body breaks down faster than somebody who's not athletic. Even though they're training their body They're still exasperating those muscles, and they're exasperating those movements that the body does wear down. And I agree with you exactly to the point where don't see them as their sport. Yes, they're entertaining. Yes, they're fun to watch, but know that they do have outside interests. Know that they do have families. Know that they do go to bed at night and wake up in the morning. You know, all the same things that you do. So I appreciate that you brought that up in there.
Yeah. We can admire them, right? We can admire them for their skill and their talents, that they show us what they have. But at the end of the day, let's be their friend. Let's support them in the other areas of their life. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want as regular humans. We need to also show that to athletes and celebrities.
I also want to go back to what you said about coaches, and where you said you were able to go to your coach, and your coach was a good coach and was able to actually listen to you and understand what you needed. We need more of that as well in society. Coaches that are dependable, that people can go to, and they're not just using you as an athlete. They're not just using you for your skills, that they actually see you as a person. I think oftentimes coaches, especially at the high school level, want so much to try and get to that next level in coaching that they will tend to not care about the kids, and they'll just push them to the point where they're getting wins or they're getting the notoriety of everything. And I think we need to shy away from that as a society as well.
I agree. I mean, so I went to 4 different high schools, which is crazy. And I was on the golf team at each one of them. And I had phenomenal coaches. But so like freshman year, I was on a boys team for golf. And I do talk about that a little bit in my book, I think. And I remember being one of 2 girls on the boys golf team, and I needed a ride to practice. And none of the boys would give me a ride to practice. So I lugged my backpack from school, and I walked from school to the golf course, which was probably 2 or 3 miles away. And I got there, and coach was like, "Hey, you're late." And I was like, "Well, I didn't have a ride." He goes, "Well, why didn't you ask your teammates?" And I said, "Coach, I did ask my teammates, and they wouldn't give me a ride." And at that moment, he stopped practice, and he looked at all the boys and said, "If she ever asks for a ride, you have to have her back. She's your teammate, and you take her to practice. No questions about it." And I was like, so from that day forward, when I needed a ride, I got a ride, because that coach was like, it doesn't matter if she's female or not, she's a teammate. And you can't, disregard your teammates. So I had a good coach then. And then sophomore, junior year, I was the star. So I was at different high schools on a female team. I was the star. So they paid attention to me, and they were smaller schools. Well, one of them was smaller, one of them was larger. So the coaches were pretty good, but they wanted to really use my skills and talents for their own notoriety. So that was hard. But I was just so glad that I was being paid attention to. I was written in papers. I was talked about. And then senior year, my coach was awesome. It was a smaller school. I was written in papers. I was the star of the show. I medaled. I was team captain. But he still wanted to make sure I got to college, because I wanted to go to college on a golf scholarship, not because he wanted me to go on a golf scholarship. So most part, I was lucky, but it was also 21 years ago, right? There wasn't club. There wasn't all of these other things that are for athletes now in the summertime. It was, you had your one season. Now it's like all year round, which I still don't understand. I'm completely confused on it, but now you're right. They're focused on, how do I get the credit for this athlete that I coached? Right.
Right.
Coaches do have
Exactly.
a little about that, right? They do get a little bit of credit, but it's the athlete who has the motivation and the skill and the drive to do it. Now, some of the athletes are pushed by their parents, because the parents are living through their kids, athleticism dreams and all that. And so some don't want to do
Vicariously.
it. Right. So there's a fine line. There's good coaches out there There's coaches that want the credit because they are trying to get to the next level. And then you have coaches that are at that high level that care about the kids. You know, a lot of talk. So here in Colorado at CU, we got Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, you know, when that came
Coach
up, Coach Prime. And I was like, what? You know, because I don't follow football. Football's not my sport, but my husband, he was ecstatic. And I was lucky enough to go to an event, like a conference, like a motivational conference here in Denver, and Deion Sanders was talking. And I was like, okay, like what kind of show is this guy going to put on? You know, because everybody's talking about Coach Prime. And I was pleasantly surprised that he actually cares about the mental health of his athletes first and foremost, and then what talents they can bring to the football field. I mean, everybody knows Coach Prime, and he's got an ego. Like he knows who he is, he knows where he's at, but he does care about his athletes. And if we can cut through the red tape and we can get down to athletes are people too, and are they taking care of themselves outside of the game? That's what we need to focus on. And then the game can come. Because if athletes aren't being taken care of outside of the field or the court or the course or whatever, they're not going to perform their best on, you know. And I think we need to make sure that the coaches are well trained in mental health, how to recognize when someone is struggling, what resources they have available to them, and how to have those conversations with their athletes. And they should just get my book. It'll help them.
Right.
Give it to your athletes.
Excellent plug.
Like that. Because, you know, I think when you read it from this perspective, an athlete's perspective, it's an aha moment to be like, oh, okay, maybe I'm pushing them too hard. Maybe I just need to have a one-on-one conversation with each of my players so I can understand them more.
I agree with that. Having listened to you, you said you're a twin and you had a lot of identity issues with your sister. And to my understanding, you guys lived in separate places for a little while.
We did.
What advice would you give to your younger self, knowing what you know now, hearing what you had growing up?
So what's
But
interesting.
I want you to preface this.
Okay.
In giving advice to our younger generation now.
Well, first of all, I'm glad I didn't grow up with social media and all that. That nonsense. That would have been awful.
Yeah.
I would have listened to my mom's best friend more clearly. And I say that because my mom's best friend just adored me. I had certain people in my life that adored me and saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself, but they saw it. And my mom's best friend kept telling me, I'm a late bloomer. I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't know what that meant until, 20 some years later. But I think I would have taken that, and I held on to that. I mean, granted, I held on to I'm a late bloomer. So I always constantly said, well, I'm just a late bloomer. But it wasn't I'm a late bloomer. It was I'm a late bloomer. When am I going to bloom? When am I going to bloom? So the advice I'd give to my younger self is don't worry about when you're going to bloom. Worry about where your roots are planted. Because your integrity, your character, your values, that's what's important. Do not compromise who you are. That's the advice I'd give to my younger self.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice.
I agree. That was absolutely beautiful. That's going to have to be a short in that one because more people need to hear that. And
I just
absolutely
that too.
Resonate on that.
I've never said that before, so hey. But I think that would be it. That would be it.
Very nice. So you are more than just your sports, but you also have a few other books.
I do.
Let's go into some of your other books and tell us about those because you said you were a badass in one, and what are your other ones?
Yeah. So my first book, I didn't want to write. I never thought I was an author. I was always told my grammar was awful growing up. So I'm a believer in the higher power. And in 2018, I kept getting this nudge of like, you need to write your book. And I was like, nope, not going to write it. Don't know. Nope. English was never my strong suit, even though it's my first language. I just, because I was in speech class. And so every time I had to go to speech therapy, because I couldn't say my S's and Z's, it was always from in phonics and English. They always pulled me out of the important classes, not math. They could have just pulled me out of math. I didn't.
Yeah. You don't need that later on.
So I kept getting a nudge, and I kept getting a nudge, and I was like, I am not writing my book. Like, God, you can stop now. And then in 2019, I heard it very loud and clear. I think I might have been sitting in this office, and he was like, "You're gonna write your book." I was like, "Okay, heard ya." So my first book I wrote in 4 months. It poured out of me. I didn't want to write it, but I did. And it's called From Beaten to Badass, My Journey of Broken Blessings and How I Became My Own Hero. And this is my story from being born all the way to 34 years old. And I talk about the people that were put in my life that gave me the gift of a piece of my character, whether that was strength, integrity, faith, self-acceptance. And I pin a person to each one of them. And then I talk about my abuse. I was raped and beaten by an ex-boyfriend. And then how did I get out of that? And so this book has been sponsored in over 680 shelters across the country and 2 international. So this book has become a survival guide. It has saved lives. It has changed lives. It has shown people that they too are a badass. So I'm very proud of this book. And I thought, maybe I'll write another book. Maybe I won't. A couple of years go by and I wrote this book, The Badass Within. And this book is a collaboration where I wanted to write another book, but I wanted to give other women their voice. I wanted other women to know that their voice is their most important attribute, because we've been silenced for way too long. And I wanted them to share their stories of strength, hope, and courage. And so I gathered 14 other women for this book. So my first book became a bestseller. This one became a bestseller and a #1 new release. This book is amazing. It's so many different stories. I talk about my infertility journey in this book, where I had ended my first book off with my infertility. I'm trying to have a family. This book kind of goes more into it. And then there's stories of divorcing, alcohol, abuse, someone losing, all sorts of different losses. So 14 other women share their stories. And then I decided not to even wait another year. And a friend of mine that I met through this book, Kim Bark-White, we decided to spearhead a book together. We did Graceful Growth. This book was probably the most challenging book because it only had 5 other authors, and then me and Kim, so 7 total, about allowing one's inner compass to navigate life's painful losses, whether that be death, whether that be opportunity, family. So this was a very difficult book to write because, as any author knows, when you add more people to the fire, it can get complicated. And this book was really easy to write. And this had twice as many, and this had twice as less. And this was very difficult. So after this book, because I put this book on hold. So this book was between these 2 books. And I put this one on hold to do this book. So this book came out in 2023. And then that's when after that book was published, I'm like, okay, I'm going to finally do my second solo book. So this book. And then I wrote a book with my dad called The Homeless, where he interviewed homeless people in Oregon. I wrote the foreword and epilogue for that and published it myself. And it's an amazing story. And then I've been in 6 other books. So all of my books are nonfiction. They're true stories. They're about overcoming, about resilience, showing that we do all have a connection somewhere, somehow. We just have to give ourselves time and permission to find that common thread between us humans. Because with social media and our phones and the internet and all the noise, we forget at the end of the day, stories are what connect us.
That's fantastic. I'm actually glad you brought this up about faith. So just out of curiosity, what role has God played in your life?
So I did not grow up in a religious household, but I was the kid that woke up at 5 a.m. every day. And okay, for you millennials out there, you don't know this, but we only had like 3 channels on TV. And I would go to the TV at 5 a.m. and I would watch Jane, I'm pretty sure it was Jane Fonda and the 2 other leotard women, you know, in the leotards and the headbands and doing their aerobics. And then, you know, the TV would go blank and you had these lines and it wouldn't turn back on until like, I don't know, 8. So, my mom didn't want me to wake up the house and my stepdad didn't want me to wake up the house and everybody was sleeping because they'd sleep till 10. And I was bored out of my mind. And our neighbors, Margie and Dave, they would go to church. And our front yard and their backyard, we had a path. Like we'd go visit them and they'd give us brownies anytime we visited. And I just became very fond of them. And one day they invited me to church and I went to church and it was something to do on a Sunday morning. I got brownies. I got brownies. They're my favorite thing. So the brownies brought me to God, but it was my 2nd grade teacher who, Mrs. Haney, and she came up to me in kindergarten one day and leaned down to my level and said, I'm going to have you in my class. And I was like, okay, I don't know who you are, but okay. But in 2nd grade, I did in fact get her as my teacher. And her and I became super close. And she somehow was able to, in a public school, bring up God. And as a child growing up and being bullied and teased, I would sit at a lunch table every single day. I would try like a fresh start. I would sit down with my lunch tray at a full table thinking maybe this is the day I'll make a friend. And every single day without fail, the moment I sat down to have lunch at a table, all the kids would get up and leave and go to a different table. And so she would come and sit with me. And she told me, I just wanted a friend. And she told me, you don't want fake friends anyway. And you're not going to remember their names in 10, 15 years. And I don't remember any of their names. But I started going to church with her as I got older. And she always told me that, you know, God's got your back. And as long as you have God in yourself, then you know, that's all that matters. And eventually that relationship, I mean, we still talk to this day. I went and saw her in May. Then God put Bill Kriege in my life in college when I had my breakdown from my wrist injury. So God has put certain people in my life to say, hey, I'm here for you. Now that doesn't mean that I was always there with him. That does not mean that I always thought he was, you know, had my back. I was like, dude, where are you at? Well, in those moments that were hard, where I thought I was alone and God had abandoned me because I had a lot of abandonment issues growing up, he was carrying me. You know, I just couldn't feel that until, you know, you look back. So it's the people that God put in my life that showed me that there's got to be a God. There has to be a higher power. We're not doing this on our own. The words I speak are the words that he wants me to speak to people. It's not me, it's him. You know, I got to give him glory because I never wanted to write a book and he made me do it.
You know, I felt the same way about my book.
Right?
Yeah, I didn't want to be that vulnerable. I didn't want to tell everybody everything that I felt and did, and especially the bad stuff.
Yeah, you want to sweep it under a rug and forget it.
Yeah, really.
He's got his way, man. If he wants you to do something, he will keep telling you to do it until you do it.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. And a lot of people who know me and know my journey knows that I'm coming back to God. And the only thing I can say to people out there is it is your own journey. It is your own, move at your own pace. You're going to discover things as you need them. You're going to change as you see fit, and you're going to develop your beliefs, and it all has to atone to a higher power. But we're running a little short on time, so I wanted to ask you a few things on where do you see yourself in the next year?
Well, if God has revealed any part of his plan for me, as I hope he has, I hope I'm just, you know, not winging it. I see myself being a very renowned, in-demand speaker and pouring into people about You Are More and my talk, because mental health, the stigma around it, it needs to be broken. We need to crush the eggshells that we're so afraid to walk on. And I want to be on stages multiple times a month, speaking into people, whether it's corporate events, women empowerment events, men empowerment events. It doesn't matter to me, but I want to get the message of you are more, and really starting that conversation in mental health, being that speaker that people desperately need to hear from. That's where I want to be. I want to be touring the country and eventually the world and just pouring into people, because my income is impact. Granted, we all need to make money, but my impact, I want to make an impact. I know that I was put on this planet for a reason. I thought that was for golf. Golf was just the vehicle to get me to see what my true purpose was.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's the way God works. You know, he takes us on a journey, and we can't see around the bend. We can only really see what's directly in front of us. And if we try to guess or try to plan our own journey, it doesn't work. We never quite make what we think we're going to do, and we find out we don't have the control that we think we have. And my personal problem was, as I grew up, I thought I had control. I always wanted to be in control. I wanted everything in control. I found that I couldn't control it. It was, really, really hard. It's really hard. But then once you find out that it doesn't matter if you don't have control, because God's got control. And, that's the most important thing in my life right now, is just knowing all the time that God is in control. And I don't have to, I can let go. I don't have to worry about it.
Amen. I mean, Isn't it true? Like when chaos hits and you allow the storm to come, when it all calms down and it falls into place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
Definitely.
But we're so afraid of that chaos, right? We're so afraid of the noise and all of the things. We're like, if we try to juggle it, we're eventually going to drop it. Well, then that's when it falls.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to remember that, because I want control of everything.
I finally got into the habit of doing something that helped me relinquish control. And that was, I created a folder on my computer desktop called God's Inbox. And when I had a problem, I would write it out, and then I would put it in his inbox. And then I would remember, if I started worrying about it again, I'd remember, wait a second, he can't work on it if I take it back out again and start, worrying about it. So I've got to leave it in the inbox, leave it alone, and let him handle it. And psychologically, it's kind of a good way to handle somebody like me who wants to constantly be in control.
I have almost a similar thing, and I need to use it. So you just reminded me. It's a little tin box, and I got it at the dollar store, and it says God's got this, and inside is a little pen and a little pad, and you're supposed to write whatever and then put it in the tin. I need to use it. But I heard a guy say one time, it was like a TikTok reel or something, and he was talking about how his son wasn't doing what the parent wanted him to do, and how am I supposed to make my son do these things, but he's not doing it. And he said he finally realized that it's not his problem to solve, it's God. So he would say, hey, God, you have a problem. Like, hand it over to God. You have a problem. So I've done that. I'm like, God, you have a problem. You need to fix it.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we have to remember that God loves our family members and our friends more than we ever could. So, it's perfectly fine to turn them over to God and let God handle it.
Yeah. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. You made an announcement today on Facebook that is exciting. Something that you've been thinking about for a long time. You are making a podcast.
I am, and now I really have to follow through.
You're on camera. This is being recorded, and it's going out to the social media atmosphere out there.
Right. Well, and I've posted it on Facebook a couple of times, but life has gotten in the way. And there's some things that are shifting in my world. I work a lot of different jobs, and I'm starting to realize, like, the anxiety and the unknown of certain jobs that I have, certain part-time jobs I have, they're not fulfilling me, and they were supposed to be temporary anyway. And usually when we have something temporary, we get complacent. And I'm finding myself getting complacent and unhappy in those certain areas. I mean, there's a lot of joy in my life, so don't take that out of context. But I was like, you know what? I want to be a speaker, and that's what I've been doing. I want to do my podcast, and I keep coming up with some stupid excuse or something to get in the way. Oh, I had 5 surgeries. Oh, I wrote another book. Oh, I wrote another book. Oh, I wrote another book. So I feel, this goes back to God. I feel God is saying, hey, remember when you said this stuff was supposed to be temporary? Well, it's become a little too permanent. And so I'm going to make it uncomfortable. So now you can do the things that you're supposed to be doing, which brings me to my podcast. So my podcast is going to be called Blue Chair Conversations, Unscripted, Authentically You. And it's basically just going to have a conversation. And I have 2 blue chairs. So the blue chair on my cover of my book, I actually have 2 of them in my front room. I will sit in a blue chair for my podcast, and I'll just have conversations with people. I want to know their story. I want to see how we're connected. You know, what can we relate on? How can we help other people? What's the impact that they can bring to the world that maybe they don't know that they have? So I'm actually going to start interviewing people and launch my podcast. So Blue Chair Conversations with Erin Baer. It's going to be
fantastic. I think that it will be very successful. You're very articulate. You express yourself well, and you've got some things to share with people that they're going to find really valuable.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I hope that I can make an impact, that the impact that God intends to have me make.
You've definitely gained a fan. I look forward to seeing all your future endeavors.
Well, we'll have to have you on it. We can get you on.
Definitely.
Yes. Story.
Speaking of future endeavors, is there anything you wish to share with our viewers about how they can get in contact with you, find out more about your books, and get educated on upcoming releases?
So I have a website. It's called Beaten to Badass. However, I'm trying to shift everything to just me, not, so erinbaer.com is going to be my new website. It's out there. I just got to do, a couple of tweaks. And that's where I'll post my podcast. And, I'm looking for people that want me to come and speak to groups of people. So you can always reach me at erinbaer.com. Or my email is erin@beatentobadass.com right now. But you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok. You can just search Erin Baer. You'll find me. I'm really easy to find. You can always contact Stephen and Susan. They can get a hold of me. In all of my books, you can get them on Amazon. But if you want a signed copy, then you can get a hold of me directly. But my contact information is in my book at the back. So yeah, I really want to do speaking. So if you want me to speak, I can do that. If you want me to coach you on how to be a badass, I can do that. But it's really erinbaer.com is going to be my new place of contact. And no more books.
I want a signed copy.
No more books right now. I've written too many books. Taking a break from books. So just go buy You Are More Than Your Sport. And it's on audio. And I actually, audiobook's only $5. And I actually read it myself. I did. And I had one of my professional athletes that endorsed the book. He wrote the foreword and he recorded his part.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That sounds really good.
Good.
Is that available on
Amazon?
It's on Awsound, so I can definitely send the link over to Stephen, and you guys can post in the comments or whatever. But it's only $5 for the book, and I recorded it myself, and I'm super excited about it. It was so much fun because then you can feel the emotion and the, from me myself. So I'm really excited. Yeah, this book is. I loved my first book. Don't get me wrong, but this one is my pride. This is my pride and joy because it's just so personal, and it's really where I had a pivotal moment. I guess I just didn't know it was pivotal until 21 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Right? We never know, the impact it's going to have until maybe a moment later or years later. And I never really thought about my golf injury until my alma mater was like, hey, I want you to talk about this. I mean, that had to be a God thing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I am so happy that you were able to come on today. I think you and I have been Facebook friends for about a year now.
Has it been that long already?
I've seen your growth. I've seen what you're doing, and I've always been this like ship passing in the night with you, just enjoying your success and seeing you grow and seeing you become just this awesome person. I've been honored in seeing you become this. So I definitely am a fan, and I definitely want a signed copy of your book.
Just send me your address and I'll send you one.
It sounds good. Send me over all your stuff, and we'll post it to YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Facebook, so anybody can get in contact with you and get your books. And I look forward to the next chapter of your life and just being a fan, seeing you grow.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been truly an honor. I know it was, it was tough to schedule because of all the things I do, but I'm glad we can make it happen. And you guys have been amazing. I love this. And if there's anything I can ever do to help promote you guys, or if you want to be on my podcast, just let me know. And that goes out to the audience members too that are watching. Like, if you want to connect with me, let's get your story out there. Let's make it happen. So thank you so much.
That sounds great.
Thank you. Very well.
Thank you so much for coming on.
I agree. Yeah, thanks for spending your Sunday with us. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you. And we'll talk after the show.
All right.
What an amazing person. That was, wow.
Yeah. I started from zero there, zero information about her, knowing absolutely nothing. And I'm very impressed. By the end of the show, I realized she's really had an interesting journey. She's as she talked about the roots, I can definitely see that, she's allowed her personal tree to grow deep and create roots, and which results in the good character and the way that she is able to share with other people and inspire people. I just think that's fantastic.
No, just very inspiring on so many levels with things that I'm so glad we were able to have her on this weekend and spend her Sunday with us. And man, she's gonna have a bright future ahead of her, and she's gonna inspire a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for watching Shine with Curiosity and Encouragement podcast. Thank you for spending your Sunday with us. I want to wish everybody a safe and thankful Memorial Day weekend, and be safe, eat some good food, and we will see you guys next Sunday.
Bye.
Bye.
Ever dreamed of seeing your name on the cover of a book? As a book publisher, we understand the challenges of self-publishing. If you're lost in the process, wondering about illustrators, book coaches, or formatting issues, worry not. At Soul Sunshine, we're here to guide you. Let's turn your dream into reality. Contact us to get started.